generally speaking, people will stay when they want to, right? Big piece here. Now, what does staying mean? For me, when I think about my connections in relationship anarchy, I think about this deep embrace of change and the reality that I am committed to these people through the ebbs and flows of what that might look like. There might be periods of distance where we find ourselves more connected to other people, and can we still maintain a relationship there? We might find periods where we're much closer in orbit and still maintain relationship there. We might find periods where we haven't had sex for years, right? And still maintain depth and intimacy there. And so to be committed to people, regardless of the boxes that it fits in, that's what I find to be commitment. And then the freedom to get to explore anything that I want in my entire life. And then I choose you as the person that I want to spend my limited time and energy with. That's hot. Like, that is so sexy to me. I understand that it can be nervous system scary, but on the other side of it, it's also so erotic to know this person has an abundance of possibility, all of the freedom. I support them in all of that. And they want to spend time and energy with me.
Welcome to Playing with Fire, the podcast for people who are ready to custom build their love.
We're talking about non-monogamy, however you design it, as an individuation opportunity.
Want to leave the default and make your life spectacularly you? You're in the right place. Ken, I am so excited because we said we were going to do a follow-up episode with Nicole, and Nicole agreed to come back. So, Ken, we're going to talk about relationship anarchy again.
That's very exciting that we have Nicole to do that with. And the topic is, well, we have a lot of people interested in it right now.
Right. We've been hearing more and more, both from clients and from listeners, questions. So we're going to dive into the whole picture, the liberation possibility, the consciousness raising possibilities with Nicole Thompson, who is a queer, non-monogamous sex and relationship psychotherapist. And I see Nicole has their doctor in front of their name now, which is very, very exciting.
Yes, it is.
Nicole, you came and spoke with us previously about psychedelic integration therapy and non-monogamy, and such a juicy conversation. And so, yeah, I just want to open up this conversation with, would you just describe relationship anarchy as you see it? Because I think it's important to start with a lived experience, like your definition, what this means for you, and then we'll just dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's such a joy to be here and be speaking to your listeners again. Hello, everyone. Yeah, it's hard to answer that question, right? 200 pages of a dissertation, right? Tell me the one sentence, sentence.
Yeah.
But if I were to do that, I would say that relationship anarchy is the deconstruction of internalized power systems to design your own relationships.
Well, okay, so that's one of those beautiful moments, like when the artist has learned to render the perfect line drawing because they've done 12 years of nothing but this drawing.
Yes.
I hear how your research, how your dissertation has allowed you to enter into this dialogue with such depth. And I am really excited about that. So let's just start off you have a podcast called Modern Anarchy.
Yes.
And that's how I first ran into you. I was actually being interviewed by you. And then I started listening to Modern Anarchy. And what I love is that you take a really broad look. Like you're not, I don't feel like Modern Anarchy as a pigeonholed podcast. It's a really broad look. So would you tell us a little bit about the word anarchy here? Because I mean, I don't think we should decontextualize it. Like we need to get clear. What are we talking about?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So there's a lot of common misconceptions about the word anarchy, chaos, right? In terms of political propaganda, there's been a lot to say that it's just chaos and fires and burning and, destruction, all of that. when you really get into the text of Anarchy and the philosophy itself, it's really about community and mutual aid and liberating ourselves from the powers that govern over us, right? And so when we think about applying that to our relationship structures, it's about all of the unconscious power structures that are there, right? So if we want to get into that, some good examples are the relationship escalator. I'm sure your listeners are familiar
Yeah.
with that, right? And for anybody who's not, it's that sense that when you are dating, you are looking for, you go on a date and then you become exclusive and then you get married together and then you live together and then you have kids and then you die together, right?
Yeah.
That very clear, like,
There's one
woohoo.
path and one destination.
Exactly. Happily ever after, right? And so that's definitely one escalator. I also talk a lot about the intimacy escalator, right? Because there's also expectations for sexuality and intimacy. Mainly that sex is the highest form, first off, but even within that, it starts in this very linear way where it's you are attracted, you maybe hold hands, you kiss, you do foreplay. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deconstruct that word, foreplay.
Right.
Right?
Foreplay.
Yeah.
As if it's one thing. Right.
Exactly. And
We're not
so
doing anything yet. This is before.
This is before.
right. So
Wait.
on the escalator, let's keep
Yeah.
climbing, right?
Yep.
It's just like, oh my gosh. And so that, and then the pinnacle is PV penetration sex, right? And that's the highest form of intimacy. So that's another escalator we have in a lot of our relationships that we need to deconstruct. Right. And so when we're thinking about those pieces, we're really taking away the paint by numbers to relationships. If you come to a coloring book and you say, wow, okay, this paint here, this, that, right? To be able to have this blank canvas, which is often some of the anxiety, right? As an artist, because you're like, wow, I could design anything I want. Wow, okay. But also what beauty, right? So that's where I see relationship anarchy coming into the scene, especially when we're talking about the frames of non-hierarchy. Now, I could nerd out on this for hours, and I think we should. I think that's an important part of what that means and what that looks like. Important. And so coming from the movement of expansive relating and polyamory, there's this frame of non-hierarchy of wanting to have equal care for the people in your lives. Sometimes relationship anarchists don't even use labels, right? And refer to everybody as friends. Obviously, the point again of relationship anarchy is to construct it for yourself. So as we go through this, it's not like I'm saying there's one way to do this. Some relationship anarchists love labels, others don't, right? It's really about your decision to be able to construct that. And so it really comes from this frame of trying to deconstruct all of these various pieces of how to relate, whether it's the hierarchy of one person or even in polyamory, two partners over the rest of your whole community.
Right.
I think it was really expansive for me to go into my dissertation and have participants be speaking about applying relationship anarchy to their kids. Because I came from the
Oh.
poly lens. So I was like
Yep.
thinking
Yeah.
poly, expanding here more than just two partners. And then people were talking about it with family. And I was like, oh, I'm missing a whole chunk of this, where it's really about all of our relationships. And so expanding to see that all of our relationships are important, not just the romantic and sexual ones. And so that's a significant frame shift
Wow.
for
Yeah.
most people.
And you mentioned you brought up the connection of anarchy to the political
Mm-hmm.
landscape,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it is something that people notice. They notice the word.
Right.
So, how does the anarchist political values? How do the anarchist political values um, shape relationship anarchy in practice?
Mm-hmm. I would say the self-governance piece, right? So trying to liberate yourself from those power structures that are so deep. I need to live XYZ ways because society has deemed that to be the way to live. Now, that again is deep within our unconscious because we are social beings that need to be loved by everybody around us. And so to get outside of the norm is really scary. So we have some deep classical conditioning and nervous system conditioning in that. And it's important when you look at other cultures around the world to understand that not everybody lives relationships like this. Not everyone lives in the nuclear family. wow, not everyone is monogamous. Wow, right? And so that ability to self-govern away from the power structures, that's a really important piece of this. And then to understand that self-governance is not just hyper independence like liberal thinking, right?
Mm.
It's actually tied within deep community care. That's a huge part of anarchy, is mutual aid and caring for multiple people. And so I would say it's that balance between the self-governance and community care and bringing those together. So it's not just do whatever the hell you want. That would be more liberal thinking.
Yeah. I'm so glad that we're immediately here because I think
Yeah.
this is where myself, my early exposure to relationship anarchy was through a couple of brief relationships, if I can even call them that,
Sure.
where someone had taken the label of relationship anarchy and applied it to fucking around and doing whatever they wanted.
Right.
And I didn't know any better. This is a long time ago. And I didn't even know what question to ask. I heard
Sure.
this term. It's a label someone applied to themselves, which of course they get to do. And then it just made me want to run in the other direction. It just made me start flicking by anybody on a dating app who used that phrase for years
Sure.
because I was so turned off by the way some people were living it, which of course is true of any label. Like
Right.
anyone can choose any label. So I really love that we're deep in how what I'm hearing from you is we can't separate the anarchist political values, the principles of anarchism from relationship anarchy. Like we really like they're intrinsically connected,
Mm-hmm.
and yet any label could be used for by a bad actor. Like, and
Right.
we have to just be aware of that. So that's, but I love that you also took it and said it's not just about being hyper individualistic, because that doesn't get us where we want to go. Like I would say the vast majority of people I talk to, they truly want to go to a place where their relationships are of deep care,
Yeah.
are of communal care. But also most of us been brought up for it. We haven't been trained for this.
Right.
We've been trained for hyper individualism. So I
Yeah.
can see why the accident sort of happens where we hear this term or we see it used and then we accidentally fall into hyper individualism. Is there something that you ground yourself to in order to stay connected to these principles? Is this something that you learned through community, or did you turn to the books? Like how did you get
Oof.
here? Because
Yeah, that's a good question.
I just ran in the other direction. I got hurt really badly and I ran in the other direction. I really give you a lot of
Yeah.
credit. I can't imagine that you haven't
Yeah.
also gotten banged up along the way.
Yeah, which makes sense, right? Especially with minority cultures, right? We don't have enough examples of it. So if you
Yeah.
get one bad example, then we go, oh, okay, right? And I have met relationship anarchists who straight up, quote unquote, said, I am a relationship anarchist because no one can tell me what the fuck to do. And I was like, oof. That's
I
that
hear
is
you
not
and
right. Exactly. I was like, that is not the relationship anarchy I practice, but that is okay, right? And so for me, what my path was coming out of purity culture. I feel like I talked about this last
yeah.
time we met. This very restrictive talk about internalized power structures. Wow.
Actually internalized.
Yeah.
You've now built them on top of you living in them. You've built them inside, which we all
Yes,
have.
that's
But
how it
purity culture does a
works.
job.
Yes, and that's how it works for all of us, right? Is it's deep within our unconscious, again, because we're social beings, and so we're looking to other people for what is normal. If I grew up in a completely different society, I would have probably been living those values, right? And so
Right.
unpacking all of that, I think this is, you can see this in my dissertation too, compared to other texts like Juan Carlos. He wrote a book called Relationship Anarchy and had a conversation with him on my podcast, and we talked about like all the different power structures, right? Including feminism, racism, ageism, all of it is tied into relationship anarchy. So power structures. Now I'm hella passionate about sexuality because Lord knows there is so much to unpack there, especially for women. Wow. Wow. And so I am definitely going through that lens and looking at it through that. And I think through my dissertation expanded to see more of it. But that was definitely that was definitely my lens, was looking through sexual liberation, going down the path of polyamory, and then having this deep question about wanting to ethically love multiple people, and this question of hierarchy, because I knew that I didn't want to have veto powers that didn't sit right with my value system. And so how do I do this in a non-hierarchical way? Like, at first I was thinking, great, I'll have maybe 2 partners. We'll do 50-50, 3, 4. We got 25, 25, 25, 25. And I was trying to figure out what that looks like. Now where I'm sitting at, if I could speak to my younger self, I would say, hey, Nicole, there's actually like 8 billion people on the planet. You're going to have a stratification of people that you are connected to, okay?
Yeah.
So I think about it within circles, right? 8 billion people on the whole planet, and then it gets smaller and smaller to my community. And so, yes, there is a stratification of how close someone is to me.
Yeah.
Inevitable, right? But the people in those connections don't have power over the others, right? Key difference there that I live through.
And this is let's stay here for a second, because I talk about this a lot in my learning groups in Year of Opening,
Sure.
about like when we use the word hierarchy, most people don't seem to really, like, they don't necessarily know that hierarchy is inherently talking about power over. Like that's, or I should say, the dictionary definitions that we have, that like this is how, and we build meaning out of these words. So when I hear people say, I want hierarchy, and I'm not going to apologize for that, my next question for them is always, can I ask you some questions about power
Yeah.
and about who gets to decide what for whom?
Right.
And because I really want to be curious about it, because and often as we go through this conversation, the person I'm interacting with realizes, oh, I don't want power over, but I want somehow to feel like I'm safe.
Yeah, of
And the
course.
only way I've known how to feel safe is through having this idea that I am first, or I'm top, or I will be chosen first all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's the overcoupling of like exclusivity equals safe.
Mm-hmm.
But in my lived experience, exclusivity hasn't always equaled safe.
Yeah.
So that's how I unplugged those things. But I see people struggling with, but if I don't have a hierarchy, how would I be safe? But it sounds like we got to get down into the word here. Like,
Yeah.
what do you mean? What is it that you're looking for? Because power over. Can you give, if this is okay? Not everybody loves giving examples, but do you have an example of, like, what does having power over another in a non-monogamous situation, what might that look like?
Sure. So say I wanted to go on a date with someone, which I don't even use those words often anymore. I'm like, say I just want to hang out with this person because I'm trying to just unfold and see what connection naturally goes. Right.
Happens.
But say I'm in that sort of paradigm where I'm like, hey, I would like to go on a date, hang out with this person. I'm excited about them. And then my other partner says, absolutely not. I do not like that person. I know about them. I know this. I don't like them. You are not allowed to.
Okay.
Right? Okay. Well, if I'm in a primary dynamic, I need to defer to that, right? Or even sometimes I've seen with clients moments where someone will have planned like a vacation or a trip with a partner, and then the other partner says, I need you right now. And obviously there are times where there are real emergencies. Let's not negate that, and a need to come together for community, but almost as if the jealousy itself creates an emergency where the panic says, I need you now. And if you cancel your plans with your person, it's an indication that I'm actually important enough and more important than that person. I think the first example is pretty clear. The second example gets much more murky when you're in it relationally.
I've lived that example, and I've been on both sides of, or all three points in that. Like when the jealousy triangle comes up, jealousy does create an emergency. It is a false emergency, because the first thing we can do when working with jealousy is slow down. Like, like the very first thing I want everybody to do is slow down, because it's telling a story. But I love that you're calling out how this is power over. I think we often miss where we are, like, leaning into, I want power over this situation. And really getting curious about, well, how else? Like, what else could happen here that would help me feel safe? Because I can think of a million ways that I might feel safe now, but when I was in early days, and that's like years, by the way,
Yeah.
early days, like the first 8
Right.
years,
Right.
my body wanted proof through monogamous, like it was monogamous ways. That's what would
Yeah.
provide me the proof. And it took
Mhm.
so much
Right.
time to untangle that.
Which is wild because statistically, we know the rates of divorce. We know
Right.
the like 50. We know the rates of infidelity somewhere between 40 to 70%, which is a horrible stat. But even if we hit somewhere in the middle there, I mean, you're looking at like a pretty likely chance that you're going to hit a wall at some point. Now, so I don't know really how safe that is, which is really a
Mm.
part of what pulled me into this, honestly. It wasn't like I was like, yes, I want all this liberation. It was like I watched my parents go through divorce and cheating, and I said, I don't want that. How the hell? I started reading and Mating in Captivity, and I'm like, wow, the desire in our long-term relationships, how do I avoid that crash? And that's really what kept me on this path, despite the fact that I cried a lot every single step of the way, right?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
stretching can be hard, okay? And now what I think makes the biggest difference is community. I know this as a psychotherapist. I know you know this, right? The power of community for our resilience, right? And so when we think about love as a resource, right? Food, water, love. You need it. You absolutely need it. When you are in a paradigm of relating where you have one relationship or maybe none, but have one relationship that is giving you romantic and sexual feelings and connection, the idea of sharing your one source of water in a very dry desert
Mm.
sounds horrible. Absolutely not. Why would I ever? Are you kidding me? Right? Versus when you start to have multiple loving connections flowing into you from very different ways, you feel really saturated in a level of love that makes it much easier to share with other people. Transformative to have that many connections, right? And so I think that's a really big piece of this is really saturating yourself in loving connection as much as possible because it makes sharing that much easier.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's a beautiful illustration. And I'm going to say the obvious thing. It's like the wetness, the lushness that comes.
Sure.
I love that image that you're bringing.
Yeah.
There's a lushness to it. And it can be really challenging to build community. So I just want to give a shout out to anyone right now who might be feeling like, yeah, but I don't have that yet. I don't have
Mhm.
community yet. I'm still trying to figure out, or maybe even lost community as part of their transitioning out of the
Sure.
mono paradigm, out of the
Absolutely.
normative paradigms. I know I lost a lot of community.
Yep.
So the first thing that happened was I went from a lush jungle of love to, oh, this does feel dry, and it was
Yep.
scary.
Yep.
And then having to like also open up my imagination about what love is exactly. It doesn't always look the way or feel the way I was taught that it
Right.
would. So
Right.
like you said at the opening there, it's not just about our romantic relationships. It's
Mm-mm.
about reconfiguring and making space for how so many different ways of being with someone
Yes.
are part of that communal care system.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to go back to the example you gave of power over. So you
Mm-hmm.
have this situation where one person is feeling a sort of default entitlement to say, I won't allow this. And I've heard many people be like, okay, I get that that isn't something we necessarily want, but in its absence, what is commitment? Like,
Mm.
what is it? How do I express commitment? What does it even mean to me? I wondered if you had anything to say about that.
As if the power over dynamic is a way to show that you love that person or committed to them.
Yeah.
And that, and also from the other side, to capitulate to it is to say, well, I committed to this, so this is how
Right.
I will respond to that.
Yeah, the listeners who might not be viewing the audio are watching my face go, what?
And this, I believe, this connects back to what you were describing as the deconstruction of internal systems of power. Like,
Yes.
oh, what do I
Yes.
do instead? And it's a question people ask. Well, okay, how do I do that? What do I do?
Right.
I'll add a little nuance to this question. Maybe it'll
Hmm.
help also. We had a client just last week say, I don't know what to do to show commitment because now this person happens to have two really caring partners. They're all non-monogamous, and they're all open to
Yeah.
building a lot of community. But
Mhm.
he said, I don't know what words to use, because all of the words I learned
Mhm.
to say I'm committed, they're
Yeah.
all mono.
Yeah.
They're all, and the ones that he was trying on, the ones that weren't mono were still quite they were quite top down. They were very
Sure.
Yeah.
much
Power
like, I will choose you
based.
over. There
Mhm.
was a
Yeah.
lot of that, or even the songs that he wanted to send. So he was running into that, and I'm thinking, like, yeah. So what could commitment sound like, if, or look like, if it's
Yeah.
not, just this default? I get to tell you what to do, and you get to tell me what to do.
Right, right, right. Well, let's first name a lot of where that comes from. Okay. Wow. So the lineage of romantic relationships being about passing down property,
Mhm.
right? I gotta take the history lesson, although I will answer the question of what it can look like.
Yeah,
But let's first acknowledge where it's coming from, right? Previously, we were nomadic species until we started having farming agriculture. We developed the plow and started having more planted, stationary ways of living. And then once we had that and we had wealth and property, we wanted to pass it down a lineage, right? And so then that created marriages and structures where you get married for that property passed down, and it's an obligation. Now, the sense of the romance coming out of that is a much more novel thing that comes from like the 1800s, a little bit after that. And so now we're trying to put love into that. Often in those narratives, love was the affair. When you really go
yeah.
back to those narratives, right? It was like, wow, I have to marry this for my dowry, right? But I love this other guy over here. And so that's where we start to get this narrative of romance and getting out of that, right? And so now we're in this period where we have romance and these expectations of the passing down of property and marriage. And so we've kind of stepped into a next cultural space of obligation and duty, right? There's a lot of marriages that have existed out of obligation. I am married to this person. The socially conditioned thing is to stay dedicated to them for the rest of my life and to negate anything else that I want, because that's what it means to be a good person, right? So
Yeah.
now we have relationships that are sensed out of duty and obligation. So it makes sense that you would feel like the right thing to show commitment is to negate my desires and be here with this person because a sense of duty. We're definitely transforming that in our modern era with divorce and other things like that. People are leaving because there's not the passion there. So
Right.
we're in a completely new era. And again, let's be reminded, women couldn't have credit cards till 1970. And so financial freedom to just leave these relationships, back in the day, women would be killed if they had sex before marriage, right? We're just, wow. Okay, so let's put that into the context. 1970s here. We're talking about 50 years now. We're in an absolutely new era of relationships, right?
Yeah,
But
we
that does,
act like it's like so old. This is
Mhm.
within my lifetime.
right.
Like, my lifetime. Like, my mother didn't marry
Oh.
just for love. She
Right.
married also for escape. My
Yes.
like Ken, your grandmother was sent to
Mhm.
marry, like sent from
Yep.
Scotland to this country. His grandmother, just his grandmother, sent to this country, left the person she loved, and was given to a man.
Right.
Like, we're not. It's not a million years ago.
Right.
It really
Right.
isn't.
Exactly. And so that's where that comes from, that sense that to be in a good relationship, I need to negate myself and be committed to this person. Right. And so, and also our general sense of love and community care, I think that's also a part of that. Right. And so when we think about trying to see a new world of what that looks like, what can commitment look like? The reality is, and something that I remind myself every single day as someone who practices this and all of my clients, is that when people want to stay, they will.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They will. They will stay when they want to. And when they don't, they will leave. And there's actually no way in our current age, right, to
Yep.
change that, especially with when we have these freedoms, right? When you don't have the privilege, right? The less you have in socioeconomics, the more you do actually have to
And now we
stay.
have survivalist marriage. Like, I have to stay married because I literally can't survive.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So things to think about. But generally speaking, people will stay when they want to, right? Big piece here. Now, what does staying mean? For me, when I think about my connections in relationship anarchy, I think about this deep embrace of change and the reality that I am committed to these people through the ebbs and flows of what that might look like. There might be periods of distance where we find ourselves more connected to other people, and can we still maintain a relationship there? We might find periods where we're much closer in orbit and still maintain relationship there. We might find periods where we haven't had sex for years, right? And still maintain depth and intimacy there. And so to be committed to people, regardless of the boxes that it fits in, that's what I find to be commitment. And then the freedom to get to explore anything that I want in my entire life. And then I choose you as the person that I want to spend my limited time and energy with. That's hot. Like, that is so sexy to me. I understand that it can be nervous system scary, but on the other side of it, it's also so erotic to know this person has an abundance of possibility, all of the freedom. I support them in all of that. And they want to spend time and energy with me.
That is, I mean, I have an incredibly heated connection with Ken, and it is because, like, I know every day. Yep, abundance of choice.
It's
Wow, I
energized
still want to
by that.
stare at you.
Mhm.
Why? Like,
Yes.
honestly, I don't even know why. I am compelled, and I love that. Like that feeling.
Yeah.
It's the edge of NRE. It's where
Mhm.
NRE and ERE, like new
Sure.
relationship and
Yeah.
established relationship, intersect. Like that Venn
Yes.
diagram overlaps, and it's so juicy. But it's like you can't have it when love is obligatory.
Right. I
Like it
love your
Mhm.
introduction of the obligation into the conversation because of how it is. Uh, it often has a deadening effect on the connections.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Mhm.
what would you say to someone who's struggling with these first steps?
Mm.
Like perhaps they're hearing about relationship anarchy and they're thinking like I immediately when we first broached this topic
Yeah.
just a few weeks ago on the podcast, we had several clients who were like, whoa, okay, so this sort of takes what we've already been talking about, because we spent a lot of time talking about design your relationship, get
Yes.
conscious about your relationship, and something about this really grasps the imagination for many people. Like, okay, I want to do this. What are some of the first inner steps? Like, what are one or two inner steps that you would recommend someone look at,
Mm.
or question they might ask themselves?
Yeah. Look at how many relationships you already have wherever you're at. It's not like, oh, I need to get somewhere, actually,
Mm.
right? Take a deep breath and see how many people you are already connected to. Because all of us, I want to do two things with my career. I want to dismantle rape culture and invite all of us to reflect that every single one of us already has multiple relationships. I think the world would be
Yeah.
changed by just that frame shift. And so I think the first thing would be to sit and think about that. How many people do you talk to? Do you know? Do you see? And can you start to feel the love and the intimacy and the connection that is there, regardless of whether you're having sex with that person? Starting to tap into that, that's a really big frame shift. And I don't want to undermine the importance of frame shifts. As a psychotherapist, you know how essential that is. It's the cliche for the listener, right? The half empty or the half full
Yeah.
lens. Which way are you looking at it? And so that first frame shift of relationship anarchy, to understand, wow, I have so many different connections and all of them are essential for my well-being, and I am a product of my environment with that community, and I care for that community. And so starting to recognize the ways that you can prioritize your pleasure as well as the collective pleasure of your community and seeing into that. Now, beyond that, when we're stepping, there's a lot of ways to do relationship anarchy, right? It's not just about sexual liberation. You could never have sex with anybody. There are even monogamous relationship anarchists, right?
Yeah.
So I think that frame shift is the biggest piece of it, and being intentional with your relationships. Now, to be clear though, with my research, all of my participants were doing non-monogamy and expansive relating. There's definitely a bend in the relationship anarchy community towards more expansive, multiple partnership ways of expansive relating with sexuality. So when it comes to diving deeper into that, I think the first thing is to connect to your body, because
Mm.
Lord knows all of these deeply conditioned narratives around love and romance and community are deep within your nervous system. And so it's going to challenge your nervous system in so many ways. And as Dr. Jolie said, right, that first step with jealousy is to be able to work with that in the body and slow down and identify the narratives that are being said there, right? and then also define community. And I understand some people might not be able to tap into that easily, but there are online communities
Yeah. Yeah.
and there are
You don't have
in-person
to be alone.
communities. Yes, yes, and often those communities can also be in other main communities, whether that's like flow arts, psychedelic spaces, D&D, the rock climbers, right? Like all these communities do have subsects of little relationship anarchist communities. I know in Chicago, I have the privilege of being in a pretty liberal space, leftist space, right? And so there are actual like anarchist meeting communities, which is really cool, right?
Yeah.
And so I think for people to get connected, like looking on social media, looking on other spaces, because it definitely exists. And if that is not possible too within lived relationships, to know that every sort of content that you're taking in, even this conversation as you're tuning in, dear listener, this is a form of relationship. You're hearing our discussions and our conversations. And so the more that you digest that content, the more that your own consciousness will shift over time because you are surrounding yourself with these ideas. And so really diving deep into the content, diving deep into the literature, and then having compassion for yourself because there's so much in our unconscious and in our body around safety to unlearn. And so it really is a practice. That's why I say practicing relationship anarchy. This is not a destination. I'm going to get to the end of my life, whenever that is, still unpacking how deep the tendrils of the system are within my body and within my brain, right? That's not to negate how far you can go in that journey. I have many clients who do that and forget, right? We're always like pushing, pushing, pushing. So many of us have already come so far, so we can celebrate that, but it's still that practice, right? And so I think having that compassion for yourself as you go through that is really important.
Yeah. I so appreciate this tending to the relationships that you have. I remember feeling incredibly lonely
Mm.
and having the wake up call of my own therapist reminding me ever so gently, Jolie, you also have 7 children. This is while they
Yeah,
were all teenagers. And she was like,
sure.
yeah, so you're tending 7 relationships there
Yep.
on top of your your relationship to your parents and your family of origin and all of that. Like, don't discount that. And it was a really helpful reminder because sometimes I can fall into that trap of like feeling not non-monogamous enough or feeling not
Sure.
queer enough
Right.
based on like whoever I'm fucking. What a
Right.
weird, like, it is such a weird thing, and yet I fall into that little hole when I myself get caught in what it looks like
Right.
to an outsider instead
Right.
of wait, am I checking in with no, how many relationships am I tending? Who
Yeah.
am I? I really like that question and being with that. It feels very open-ended and soft. Like it hits my
Mhm.
body in a soft way. Like, wait, like it doesn't,
Yeah.
because the whole point is we're unplugging from the idea that your relationships have to follow a particular escalating path.
Right.
So yeah, really
Absolutely.
stay with that question and come back to
Absolutely.
it. Because I feel inspired to come back to it tonight in my own journal. Like just right.
Right.
Like
Right.
who are you relating to?
Exactly. And the neuronal pathways with that, right? We know that the more you fire that neuronal pathway, the way of thinking, it's like a muscle. It gets stronger and stronger. So if you have like a gratitude practice, right, and you go down that, your brain will start to go there. And I would say this is almost a form of a gratitude practice, right? It's because so much of our society is like, you're single, you're single, you're single, or like you're saying, you only have one partner, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, right? To actually take a step back and see all of the community that you have around you, that's a muscle that you need to start flexing. And the more you do it, the more you feel the fullness of that love. It's really like turning up the saturation and the hue that's already
Mm.
there and really turning up and feeling it. That's something that comes again and again in my dissertation. And then on the podcast, every 4th episode is a interview with a relationship anarchist, specifically on the same questions. And we always hit on that of how much more full life feels when you really tap into that perspective. And again, it's going to be new and uncomfortable at first to start seeing it in that way, but the more that you do it, the more that it will become just the natural way that you live to see that fullness.
And you've mentioned safety. We've all mentioned safety a few times here, and I can see how a consistent practice will build up the sense of safety because,
Yeah.
like you said, it starts to feel normal. In other words, it starts to feel like how life should be, which
Mhm.
is less scary than this is new. What am I doing?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think an important piece that I try to practice in my relationships when we're talking about safety is, as humans and existentially, we always want control. Like, control, control, control,
Mhm.
please don't change. Control. Oh man, I'll spend a lifetime just learning to embrace that change is the only inevitable. Wow. Okay, here we go. And so in that practice too, when I'm with my different connections, right? I try to remember, right? The people who want to stay will stay, right? I can provide all of that internal affirmation, all of the self regulation practices and co regulation with my community and interdependence, because we're not just an island. You can lean on other people when you're upset too. That's okay, folks. And also the reality that if my partner is doing something that I don't agree with, that I don't preferably like, which is inevitable.
Yeah. I
Yep.
mean, we're not going to like it all. We're not going to
Yeah.
like everything everybody else is doing all the
You,
time.
right? You might not even like the person they're doing it with.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I
Yep.
mean?
I don't like
Wow.
everything I do all the time. I'm
Yes.
certainly not going to like all the things everybody else does.
Exactly. And so in those moments, rather than saying, you can't do this, right? Power over, I will say, okay, now, we can talk about the scale of this, but rather than controlling other people, I will either remove myself or take a step back or reframe or reorient myself. It's not about controlling. You have the freedom. Of course, those freedoms do have consequences, right? And so we can negotiate all of that and what that might look like. But for me, rather than having moments of telling my lovers that they can't do something, which is inauthentic to my value system, there will just be movement on my part. I can move myself either further or away or change how I'm relating.
And now I instantly think about how I do that better when I feel able to resource in multiple ways. So I'm now
Mhm.
hearing how the threads of it being important actually to feel, not just to be dating multiple people, but to feel your communal setting, like to
Yeah.
actually feel, like to know that you are held in multiple ways. And so it's okay if a relationship shifts. Because
Mm-hmm.
often I hear people wanting reciprocity. I'm a big fan of
Sure, of
reciprocity,
course.
but confusing sameness. Like I give you this, so you give me that. Confusing that for reciprocity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Reciprocity being, I think, much more delicate and confusing in that I feel cared for and I care for you. Being in this, like, it's never going to look the same. It's going to feel a way.
Right,
And it's hard. It's ineffable.
right.
But that makes me think about how when we're experiencing this a shift into okay, I'm going to prioritize um, moving away from systems of power,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to prioritize communities of care.
Mm-hmm.
This brings me to such a hard question. What do you do when care needs aren't equal? Like, what do you do with yourself because there are all these moments, right? When I'm going to have two or more people in my life who both have needs, and also I have needs, and I care about all of them, and I want to provide, but I mean, I don't want this to just become about like martyrdom and I'm going to meet everybody's needs and ignore myself. How do how do we hold the paradox of like I want to provide care and it's and sometimes I'm going to have to make decisions.
Sure.
I'm going to have to make decisions that look like a way or feel like a prioritization that someone else doesn't like. What do I
Right.
do with that?
All the time.
All
Literally
the
all the
time.
time, right?
Yeah.
And we a very helpful practice with relationship anarchy is taking a lens at how we already do this with friends and family, right? All the
Yeah.
time. So to remember that you might have a friend who wants to see you every single day, wants to really hang out, really, and you don't feel the same way. It's not that you don't like them. Maybe you want to see them once a month, once every couple of months. There's that discrepancy in desire. I think the more expansive you get with relating, you realize that discrepancy in desire is not just about sex.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
It's
all desire
All
of
kinds of
everything
things. Yeah.
everywhere.
exactly. And so you have to really get comfortable with the skill of balance again between your own needs and that of the community. And I think that healthy relationships are really that give and take, right? Of sometimes you do show up, sometimes they show up for you, right? And so honoring that there will be moments where maybe more of the energy is towards someone versus another. And also that we have to let go of the mononormative thinking that I am the person to save this person, right? I feel like that's an example of the dyadic thinking that I'm the highest person. And so I need to meet all of these needs for this person. You know what's really reassuring? That all of my lovers also have lovers.
Mm.
And so if I can't show up for some reason, I do know that they are not alone. They are well resourced with other people too, right? And so we can talk about that. And so I would hope that just as much as I'm doing that delicate balance between what brings me pleasure, and hopefully I find pleasure in showing up for other people, right?
Right.
And then show, because that's really
Here's hoping.
yeah, exactly. We would hope. I feel like that we're very social creatures, and so that's really where it comes from. But to also show up for other people, there'll just be flexibility with that. There will be times where I'm able to show up and times where I'm not. And that doesn't mean I don't love that person. Again, because remember, there's 8 billion people on the planet. I can't show up for all of those, right? So there is going to be a stratification along that. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're doing hierarchy of power over dynamics. I was thinking about this today of the time and energy. It's true. We have finite time and energy. If you have 15 children, finite time and energy to
Yeah, I mean,
connect,
I've 7, and so
right?
everything you're saying is it's. I mean, I am just cast. So they're grown-ups now, and
Yeah.
still, I know if I took a tally of how I spent my relational energy with each of them over just say the last month,
Sure.
and they are between 18 and 26 years old, and still, yeah, not going to be the same.
Yeah.
It's not going to be even. I don't even think I could aim for fair because it's not like fair is such a subjective experience of, well, how does everybody feel about this at all moments? So sometimes the only thing I can do is back out and say, right, I have to look at the big picture here and show up being who I mean to be as I relate to each of these beings.
Yeah.
And that was the same when they were babies. You know, I like there was a point when I was nursing 3 people
Mm,
under the age of 5 all at once. And like, yeah, you're juggling.
right.
Juggling needs is a very human thing. But something
Exactly.
about like the romantic dyad makes it seem like it's not something that like, no, that should never happen. You should always just choose this one way. But I can think of so many places where I'm doing this juggling.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
I'd like to bring up the idea that some of what I feel in the process of that juggling, some of it is I feel judgment from the people that I'm trying to interact with. Like, oh,
Mhm.
I don't feel judgment. I imagine. I think, are they going to feel cared for by doing this? And are the people who aren't getting the care, are they going to feel cared for or neglected?
Yeah,
And I start running through these things.
sure.
And that's fairly straightforward. But there's another level where I'm like, are the people who aren't even part of this little group, but who are connected to me, are they going to start thinking about,
Right,
am I
right,
doing the right things?
right.
And that's where all of those built-in internal not just power systems but relational systems, like
Yeah,
whatever monogamy has left in me, is
yeah,
thinking, oh no, I should have been more focused on blah blah blah, and
absolutely.
I can get caught in that, and it can
Right.
throw off my decision making.
Right. And so a really important part of relationship anarchy is high levels of communication. So when you have that
Ah,
moment, the power to say, "Hey, dear lover, can we sit down? I've been realizing that I've been spinning this narrative about maybe I'm not showing up well enough for you. This, can we check in about that? How do you feel? Is there more ways that we can meet each other?" Right? The power of that conversation is so helpful to kind of stop that rumination, just go directly to the source and have that conversation. And a really big piece of relationship anarchy is meeting out of mutuality rather than obligation. And so I
hmm.
would hope that in that conversation, we could sit down together and really get clear on how we can both meet each other out of mutuality,
Mhm.
right? Within community care, knowing there will be moments where we might naturally not want to do things, but we do it because it's community care. Now, figuring that out with sex, woo. Who, right, right.
Complicated.
I could spend hours, right? So
Yeah, like, can we have another conversation? Because
anytime,
Yeah,
oh my gosh,
anytime.
yeah.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
ready
yeah.
because that's Whew. Yeah, and so finding that balance between people having the conversations and meeting out of mutuality, those are some of the best things in relationships, and understanding that it will flex and change over time. And so when there's these finite resources, you said I could get nerdy. We're gonna get nerdy, right? These,
Yes.
these
Excellent.
finite resources, I think about it almost like an axis grid, right? So if time and energy are limited, the more that you spread your energy out, right, or time out with multiple people, the less energy that you have, right? This is just a reality of the finiteness, right? Where if you have less, you can go deeper, right? And so just thinking about those things, this is why when I was writing my dissertation, I had this question, it's all about non-hierarchy. And I was like, should I title it Removing the Hierarchy or Rewriting the Hierarchy? Now, this is just nerdy title
No,
stuff,
I
right?
love
But
it.
actually, as the researcher, I'm like, this is actually everything right here. Is it
Yeah.
rewriting or removing? Now, when I was sitting through it, I was like, it is not removing the hierarchy, because again, there is no ability to remove hierarchy, which is the stratification of designation, of proximity, preferences, stuff like that. We want to remove the hierarchy over, but hierarchy itself is inevitable when we have limited time and energy. And in fact, under these systems, time and energy is power. Where I
Right.
put my time and energy impacts the system. What you're
Hmm.
choosing to spend with your money impacts the system. How I show up impacts the system. And so it's not necessarily about removing all of it, but rather rewriting it and being hella conscious of the fact that you have limited time and energy, and that itself is power. Look at your community. Is
Yeah.
it all one race? Is it all one ability? Is it all one age? Is it all one sex, right? All of these things are relationship anarchy and are at the heart of dismantling the power that is impacting all of us around the world. And so I know I can get so passionate about the sex piece because there's so much there, but it really is all of that, even our ecology, the things that you're doing to the natural world, this planet that we share, right? I've had so many deep conversations really about expanding out what it means to think about our relationships, not just even to human beings, right? But to the
Yes. The more
planet
than
and
human world,
others. Yeah.
including that in our I'm hearing the depth psychologist in me is immediately called into like, well, what about the invisible others? What
Absolutely.
about the more than human world? And how do I treat that as real? And
Yeah.
all of that brings me to maybe reimagining the hierarchies and reimagining being for me that word holds the space of I have to hold it. I have to hold the image
Mhm.
of it. I actually have to see it. I can't
Right.
pretend it's not there. So I
Mhm.
Yeah.
can't pretend that I get to have a great big eraser and I'm going to get rid of them because then what I'll be doing is shoving them into the unconscious. Shove it into the
Mhm.
unconscious. Now what we have is hierarchies being acted out without consciousness. When
Yeah.
now we're right back where we started. All we've
Yep.
done is
Right.
pretty it up with some nicer, fancier language. No
Mhm.
good though. Not like no good in the big picture.
Exactly. Exactly.
Delicious. So I'm
Exactly.
hearing I'm hearing a lot of potential shadow work
Oh,
in
yeah.
dealing with the grief and shame that's going to come up along the way. So we talked I think we hit upon fear most
Mhm.
frequently during this
Sure.
conversation, but I'm hearing the shame and grief of our past selves and then dealing with the way it feels to show up and have to recognize the limits, the finitude, like
Yeah.
confronting my finitude. I do not have everything I might wish to give and
Yeah.
really coming face to face with that. So
Yeah.
all of this makes me think I also get to be in deeper relationship with the other because we get to face finitude together, which is
Absolutely. Yeah.
beautiful and gruesome. Like
Yeah.
it's
Right?
both.
Finitude and change. Truly, you're just like, whoa, okay, I'm going to look at it. But you know what? I'd rather look that straight in the face every single day than ignore
Yes.
that reality and just live unconsciously. And so many of my research participants spoke to the reality that it's a paradigm shift. Once you
Yeah.
look at
Hmm.
relationships like this, it's like the lens are off and you see it in a completely different way. And there is no going back to the previous way of seeing it, right? You can practice monogamy. You could be celibate and never have sex again and be a relationship anarchist. So once you have
Yes.
this lens to deconstructing all of the power systems and coming through with intentionality, you're here.
You're
That's
here.
the biggest thing, right? And so as long as you're seeing that within the balance of your self-governance and autonomy and freedom within the balance of community, you're here. And that is really like that revolution right there for more people to bring that intentionality to all of their relationships. That includes workspaces, friends,
Right.
family, all of it. How can you
Our
try to
movements, our
Yes.
political movements are all spaces, every space. Yes.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, Nicole, we
This has
could
been amazing.
literally
I
talk
know. I love it.
forever, which makes me very happy. Where can
Yeah.
people find more? How can they nerd out more with you?
Yes, of course. Well, my dissertation is available for free on my
It's
website.
very good, y'all.
Ah!
It's very, very good.
Yes, come nerd out. All 200 pages is there on my website. I also host Modern Anarchy podcast. So each week we get into themes of everything we talked about today with pleasure liberation. And I have that special series where every fourth episode is getting into relationship anarchy and having those interviews. So you can find that truly anywhere that podcasts are available, and also on my website, which is modernanarchypodcast.com. And I look forward to connecting with all of you who are tuning in.
I love this so
Yeah,
much.
so
Nicole,
fun.
thank you so
Thank you
very
so
much for
much.
being with us. I hope it's not the last time we have you here on
Oh, it
Playing with
won't be.
Fire.
It won't
Truly.
be.
Excellent.
Thank you.
We talk to you all the time. It is absolutely imperative to me that we get to hear from you as well.
Yes, please.
So we'd love to invite you to join us. Join Ken and I. We're holding monthly Ask Me Anythings. You can show up, bring your questions from podcast episodes, from your relationships, bring questions about non-monogamy, about individuation, about relationship skills. We would love to share space with you. We're hosting these AMAs free of charge for our podcast listeners. You are the Playing with Fire community, and it matters a ton to us that we connect with you directly. So
Oh,
go.
I would so love to hear your questions, and it would be so awesome.
Yeah. Go to joliehamilton.com/AMA and you'll find a way to sign up real quick and get an invitation to join us in a small group where we're going to get together and talk about all things non-monogamy, individuation, and relationships.